Sergeant Marcus Llewellyn had always been convinced of the uniform's power. It was more than just patches and fabric. It was a promise, a shield, and a representation of service and sacrifice. On that humid July afternoon, Marcus wore his U.S. He put on his Army fatigues with the same hushed sense of pride he had had since his first day at Fort Bragg. He had just finished a 36-hour shift, his mind still buzzing with the memory of a successful training exercise, and all he wanted was a cold drink and a few minutes of peace before heading home. The gas station on the corner of Maple and Fifth was nearly empty, the air thick with the scent of diesel and fried chicken from the convenience store inside. Marcus pulled up at pump number 3, stepped out, and stretched his aching back, feeling the weight of exhaustion in his bones. He barely noticed the 2 police cruisers parked by the curb, their engines idling, the officers inside chatting and sipping coffee. He was used to being invisible in uniform, a part of the background, respected but rarely acknowledged. But he felt sharp, critical, and suspicious eyes on him as he swiped his card and reached for the nozzle. The officers, both white, stepped out of their cars and approached, hands resting on their belts, radios crackling softly. The taller one said, his voice sharp, "Excuse me, sir. Can we see some ID?" Marcus turned, surprised but not alarmed. "Of course, officer. Is there a problem?" With his jaw set, the shorter officer first glanced at Marcus's face, then at his uniform. "We got a call about a suspicious person loitering around the pumps. You match the description." In an effort to process the accusation, Marcus blinked. "I'm just getting gas. I'm on my way from base to home." He moved slowly toward his wallet, being careful not to move abruptly. The taller officer's hand hovered near his holster. "Let's see your military ID and driver's license." Marcus handed them over, his hand steady despite the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. The officers studied the cards, their eyes flicking between the name, the photo, and Marcus's face. "You got any weapons on you?" The shorter one asked. "No, sir. My duffel bag alone is in the trunk." The taller cop nodded to his partner, who circled around the back of Marcus's car, popping the trunk and rifling through his belongings. Marcus remained motionless, his heart beating rapidly and the humiliation burning brighter than the July sun. At the pumps, people stared, some whispered, and others took out their phones. Their silent judgment, the weight of their eyes, and the awareness that no amount of service or sacrifice could keep them from suspecting Marcus. The officer at the trunk slammed it shut, shaking his head. "Nothing here." The taller cop handed back Marcus's IDs, but didn't step away. "You mind if we ask what you're doing in this part of town?" Marcus exerted himself to evenly breathe. "I live 2 blocks from here. For 8 years, I've been stationed at Fort Bragg." The shorter cop snorted. "We've had some break-ins around here. Just doing our job." Marcus nodded, biting back the urge to argue. He had long ago realized that maintaining dignity was sometimes a silent struggle. "Am I free to go?" The officers exchanged a look. Then the taller one shrugged. "Yeah, but don't hang around." Marcus finished pumping his gas, his hands shaking now, the adrenaline refusing to fade. He climbed back into his car, closed the door, and sat for a moment, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He thought about calling his wife, about telling her what had happened, but he didn't want to worry her. He started the engine, pulled out onto Maple, and tried to leave the encounter behind. But as he drove, the flashing lights appeared in his rear view, the siren blaring, the cruisers boxing him in at the next intersection. The officers approached again, this time with their hands on their weapons. "Step out of the vehicle," the taller one barked. Marcus complied, his mind racing. "What's going on?" The shorter cop grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back, snapping the cuffs on with unnecessary force. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer and suspicion of theft." Marcus stared at them, disbelief and fury warring in his chest. "I haven't done anything. I showed you my ID. I work as a soldier." The taller cop sneered. "Doesn't mean you're above the law." As they marched him toward the cruiser, Marcus caught the eyes of a bystander filming with her phone. He met her gaze, silent but pleading. She nodded, her camera steady, capturing every second. In that moment, Marcus knew this wasn't just about him. It was about every uniform, every promise, every time the world refused to see the man behind the badge. The inside of the police cruiser was stifling, the air thick with the scent of vinyl and sweat, the radio crackling with static and distant voices. Marcus was seated in the back seat, his wrists aching from the cuff's tightness and his thoughts racing through every possible outcome. He watched the world blur past the window, the familiar streets of his own neighborhood now feeling foreign and hostile. In the front seat, the officer spoke softly and occasionally glanced back at him in the rearview mirror with expressions that were hard to read. Marcus made an effort to control his breathing, to remind himself that he had not done anything wrong, and to remember that he was still the man who had faithfully served his country. But the humiliation was a weight pressing down on his chest, heavier than any rucksack he'd ever carried. The cruiser pulled into the parking lot of the police station, the tires crunching over gravel, the building looming gray and impersonal under the afternoon sun. Marcus was removed from the back seat by the officers, who then led him out of the main lobby through a side door. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glare. They marched him down a narrow hallway, past rows of desks and curious stairs, until they reached a small, windowless room. The taller officer pushed Marcus into a chair, his tone cold. "Stay put. Someone will be in to talk to you." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking into place. Marcus sat in silence, the minutes stretching into an eternity. He replayed the events in his mind, searching for the moment when things had gone wrong, for the word or gesture that had turned suspicion into accusation. He thought about his wife, about the promise he'd made to always come home safe, about the look on his mother's face the day he left for basic training. He wondered if anyone would believe his side of the story, if the truth would matter against the weight of assumption and prejudice. After what felt like an hour, the door opened and a detective entered, a man in a rumpled suit with tired eyes. He sat across from Marcus, flipping through a thin file. "Sergeant Llewellyn, is it?" Marcus nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, sir." The detective studied him for a moment, then sighed. "You know why you're here?" Marcus shook his head. "No, sir. I was just getting gas." "The officer said something about theft, but I haven't done anything." The detective closed the file, his expression softening. "The officers who brought you in called us. Said you were acting suspicious. Didn't cooperate. Matched the description of a suspect in a string of break-ins." Marcus felt a surge of frustration. "I presented my ID. I told them I was on my way home from base. They searched my car. There's nothing there." While tapping his pen against the table, the detective gave a nod. "I've seen the footage from the gas station. You didn't resist. You didn't do anything wrong." Marcus exhaled, relief and anger mingling in his chest. "Then why am I here?" The detective leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Sometimes, Sergeant, people see what they want to see. However, a procedure exists. I need to make a few calls. Check your alibi, confirm your story. Hold on tight." He stood and left, the door closing softly behind him. Marcus sat in the silence, the weight of the cuffs a constant reminder of his powerlessness. He reflected on the bystander holding the phone, the way she had nodded at him, and the hope that the truth would be discovered by someone, somewhere. Hours passed. Through the hallway's small window, long shadows were cast as the sun set low. Marcus's stomach growled, his throat dry, but no one came. He tried to focus on his training, on the discipline that had carried him through deployments and danger, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. Finally, the door opened again, and the detective returned, this time with a different energy. "You're free to go, Sergeant. You don't have any evidence against you. The charges are being dropped." Marcus stared at him, disbelief warring with relief. "That's it? After all this?" The detective nodded, his eyes apologetic. "I'm sorry. Sometimes the system fails. You can file a complaint if you want." Marcus stood, his legs stiff, his wrists sore as the cuffs were finally removed. He walked out of the station, the evening air cool against his skin, the world feeling both familiar and changed. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling, and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Hey, babe," he said when his wife answered, her voice thick with worry. "I'm okay. I'll explain everything when I get home." As he hung up, He saw a crowd gather across the street, reporters and activists holding signs, the bystander from the gas station at the front, her phone still recording. Marcus saw her, gave her a thumbs up, and felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would come out. Marcus crossed the street, his uniform still damp with sweat and humiliation, but his back straight and his eyes clear. The crowd parted as he approached the bystander. Her name was Jasmine, he would later learn, stepping forward to meet him. "I got it all on video," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "They can't pretend this didn't happen." Marcus nodded, gratitude and exhaustion mingling in his chest. "Thank you," he said, the word simple but heavy with meaning. Reporters pressed in, microphones thrust forward, questions flying. "Sergeant Llewellyn, do you think you were targeted because of your race? What do you want to say to the police department? Will you press charges?" Marcus held up a hand, his voice calm but resolute. "I want to go home to my family. I want to be treated with the same respect I've given this country." A few people nodded, while others yelled their support as the crowd murmured. Jasmine handed him her phone number, promising to send the video to his lawyer. As Marcus walked away, the cameras followed, the story already spreading across social media, the hashtags multiplying by the minute. By the time he reached his car, his phone was buzzing with messages. Friends, fellow soldiers, even strangers offering support and outrage. He drove home in silence, the events of the day replaying in his mind, the anger and shame slowly giving way to determination. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about every black man and woman who had ever been stopped, questioned, doubted, or detained for no reason other than the color of their skin. It was about the uniform's promise, the idea that service and sacrifice ought to have a purpose, and the idea that justice ought to be blind. When he walked through the door, his wife, Tasha, was waiting, her arms open, her eyes shining with relief and worry. Marcus held her tight, the tension finally breaking, the tears coming fast and hot. He told her everything. The stop at the gas station, the questions, the cuffs, the hours in cell. Tasha listened, her rage rising with each statement. "You have to fight this," she said, her voice fierce. "You can't let them get away with it." Marcus nodded, the resolve settling in his bones. "I will, but I need help." That night, they called Marcus's commanding officer, Colonel Ramirez, a man known for his integrity and his refusal to tolerate injustice. Ramirez listened in silence, then spoke with quiet authority. "Send me the video. I'll take it from here." Within hours, the wheels were in motion. The video went viral, picked up by local news, then national outlets. Civil rights organizations reached out, offering legal support. The Army launched an internal investigation, and the police department was flooded with calls demanding accountability. The next morning, Marcus met with a lawyer from the NAACP, who assured him that the evidence was clear, the case strong. They had no probable cause, no justification. "This is a textbook violation of your rights." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. He reflected on his father, who had taught him to stand tall in the face of injustice, and on his grandfather, who had marched in support of civil rights in the 1960s. He thought about the young soldiers he mentored, the example he wanted to set. "I'm not just doing this for me," he said quietly. "I'm doing it for everyone who comes after." The days that followed were a blur of interviews, meetings, and statements. The police department issued a brief apology, but the officers involved were placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Protests erupted outside the station, the community demanding justice, the story dominating headlines. Marcus found himself at the center of a storm he hadn't asked for, but he refused to back down. He spoke at rallies, his words measured and powerful. "This isn't about hating the police. It all comes down to holding them accountable. It's about making sure that no one else has to go through what I did." The crowd cheered, the energy electric, the sense of possibility palpable. Jasmine stood beside him, her video now a symbol of resistance, her courage and inspiration. Marcus knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time, he felt hope. He had been seen, heard, and believed, and that he realized was the beginning of change. The investigation moved quickly, propelled by public outrage and the undeniable clarity of Jasmine's video. Within a week, the city's police chief held a press conference, the room packed with reporters and community leaders, the air thick with anticipation. The chief's face was grave as he announced the findings. The officers had violated department policy, failed to follow proper procedure, and engaged in conduct unbecoming of their badges. He said, echoing throughout the room, "Officers Turner and Daniels are terminated from the force, effective immediately. We will be reviewing our training and oversight to ensure this never happens again." Relief, vindication, and a lingering ache of what had been lost mixed with the news rippled throughout the city. Marcus watched the press conference from his living room, Tasha's hand in his, Jasmine and her family sitting nearby. The room erupted in cheers, but Marcus felt only a quiet satisfaction, a sense that justice, however imperfect, had finally been served. Calls and messages poured in, soldiers from his unit, old friends from high school, strangers from across the country. Others simply expressed gratitude for standing up, while others shared their own tales of injustice. Marcus answered as many as he could, his words always the same: "This isn't just my victory, it is ours." In the days that followed, the city council invited Marcus to speak at a special session on police reform. He stood at the podium, his uniform crisp, his voice steady, and spoke not of anger but of hope. "We can't change the past," he said, "but we can shape the future. We can build a community where respect is given freely, where justice is not a privilege but a right." The council voted unanimously to implement new training programs, to establish a civilian review board, to create channels for accountability and dialogue. Marcus became a symbol of possibility as well as resistance. He continued to mentor young soldiers, to speak at schools and churches, to remind people that courage was not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be silent. Jasmine's video was archived at a local library, a testament to the power of bearing witness, a reminder that one voice, one phone call, could change everything. Their names were only recalled as a warning, as the officers who had cuffed Marcus vanished from the news. The gas station where it all began installed a mural, painted by local artists, depicting Marcus in uniform, standing tall, surrounded by a diverse crowd, the words justice, respect, unity emblazoned above. Marcus visited the mural one evening, the sun setting behind him, the city quiet and still. He traced the outline of his likeness, feeling the roughness of the paint, the weight of the moment. Tasha stood beside him, her arm around his waist, her head on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. Marcus shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "We did it, all of us." Marcus reflected on the journey, the fear, rage, humiliation, and triumph as they made their way home. He was aware that the battle wasn't over, that there would always be more work to be done, and that there would be more battles to fight. But he also knew that change was possible, that justice could prevail, that dignity could be restored. He thought about the next generation, about the young men and women who would see the mural, who would hear his story, who would know that they, too, could stand up, speak out, and make a difference. Marcus Llewellyn walked forward with his head held high and his heart full, ready to face whatever came next. He was aware that one act of courage, one moment of truth, could have repercussions that extended far beyond a single day, an injustice, or a single life. As the city lights continued to flicker, they cast a warm glow over the streets.